Welcome to Stories from the Top. I'm your host, Lance Tanaka, and I'll be interviewing successful executives from the best of the best global companies about leadership and their journey. Before we do the interview with Sarah Chin, Managing Partner of Deloitte Asia Pacific, I'd like to give a short brief. I've worked with Sarah for over 7 years. She is one of the most authentic, genuine leaders I've known. Listen to her. She knows of what she speaks. A few years ago, she took over Deloitte China's program to systematically prepare senior managers and directors for partner, going from doers to leaders. She made a number of enhancements, making potential partners more accountable for their self-development, challenging them out of their comfort zones, and evolving their leadership mindsets. So due to the coronavirus, we unfortunately had to change our face-to-face session to a phone interview, so I apologize for that. But I'm on the phone with Sarah Chin, Managing Partner of Deloitte Asia Pacific. So Sarah, thanks for being here.
You're welcome, Lance. Good to speak to you, as always.
If we could just start with a brief career history. How did you even get into Deloitte?
You're going to regret asking me this question, Lance, because it's not a simple answer.
Okay.
Brief history. I started off working for the Tax Bureau as an inspector many years ago. Spent about 3 years there collectively, and I was told of the possibilities if I went into a big six at that time. I did that, and I actually started off with Coopers & Lybrand, which then was merged in with PricewaterhouseCoopers in 1997. 7 years in the UK, went on a secondment to our Zurich office. Secondment then ended up making it 8 years in Zurich altogether. I just got too fascinated on all the growth in China and all the changes in China, being Chinese myself. So decided to make a leap of faith and go into Shanghai, and that's when I joined Deloitte. From there, spent about 6 years in Shanghai, and I'm now based in Hong Kong for the past 8 years.
So what was your thought process of going to China?
I wanted a change. Having been in Europe all these years, being Chinese myself, always wanting to find my roots. So there was a personal motive behind it. The business motive really was I knew that there were changes in the tax regulations coming up. I thought I could bring some overseas experience into what the Chinese were thinking when they were trying to reset the tax system at the time. So that was really the major door opener. But a lot of it was actually fueled because of personal reasons. I was just too curious on, every day when I was in Europe, picking up the newspaper, and every day I would see my clients investing X billion into China, the growth of China, the transformation of China. Curiosity just got the best of me. So it was largely a personally driven change.
Was that a difficult transition?
Lance, it took me 3 years to summon the courage to move. Being Chinese myself, I've never worked in China. I left Hong Kong when I was a child. From a cultural point of view, especially coming from Zurich, I knew it would be going from one end of the spectrum to another. It took a long time for me to decide it was the right thing to do. Yes, it was a very big decision and a very difficult decision, I must say.
An LT observation. Sarah had to make a difficult decision to move to China. In fact, it took her 3 years to make that decision, but she did it. She says later in the interview that she's really not so confident. I feel she is. But what's important is she has a strong sense of who she is and what she wants both professionally and personally. That's a powerful foundation to make even a difficult decision. What kind of advice would you give to your younger self?
A few bits of advice, actually. Number one is I would always say put your hand up for any opportunity that a company or a firm may have. But at the same time, you mustn't forget that because you're working in a big organization, there are always lots of people better than you, smarter than you, more energetic than you, and luckier than you. So therefore, never wait for an opportunity to come your way. You have to create your own opportunity, create your own future, and not be afraid to make a mistake. I've done many things in my life which I actually didn't know what I was doing, and I fell down and hurt myself a lot. But I think the trick is you have to learn to get up, back on your feet again, dust yourself off, and you will learn from that. And it's an invaluable lesson. So, Lance, I think, create your own future and don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Well, that takes great confidence.
I'm not sure that's true, Lance. I suppose if you look at me, I wouldn't say I'm the most confident of person. I always want to try something different. So maybe this is back to the curiosity point. I always want to do something different, and I'm always, I guess, admiring people who have done things. And I just think, wow, I wish I could have done that, or I wish I would do that. And then you realize the only person stopping you from not doing it is yourself. So it's not necessarily a confidence, Lance. I think you've known me for many years. That wouldn't be a word that would stick out maybe to many people. It's just, again, it's curiosity. I think that's probably what does it.
An LT observation. Be confident. She says, put your hand up. Never wait for an opportunity. You need to create it. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. The only person stopping you is yourself. Well, when you talk about cultural differences, being in China now, when raising your hand at every opportunity may not be a typical characteristic. What advice would you give to your younger Chinese colleagues?
Culture plays a big, big part here, Lance. I think you know the Asian culture very well. We're not somebody who'll be taught to speak up. We're not somebody who'll be taught to raise our hands. We're taught to be respectful and to follow the rules. Trying to encourage the team to put their hands up has been something that I've been trying to do probably for the past 12 years, ever since I got to China. And I'm not sure I have succeeded at all. Chinese tend to want to fall in line and to be compliant. So they would tend to view putting your hand up to be an arrogant gesture. So I think in a very, very tiny population, we've been able to do this, but it's really down to somebody who has a very different set of DNA from the typical Chinese. Coming back to my point earlier, it's really somebody who doesn't want to break away from the mold. I'm not sure it's something that I have necessarily passed on or tried to, or been successful, I would say, in terms of nurturing the team that we work with, because it's a discussion every single day to push them to have the confidence to drive something themselves, to push them to look for something and to create. The creation factor is something I think was going to take some time to do better for us, because I'm not sure creation is something that's always fostered. It used to be, I think, years and years ago. If you look at China, they were creating and inventing many, many different things. So I think it's really, they need somebody behind them to push them. Otherwise, that creation, putting your hand up, is a constant challenge.
As a leader, or advice that you would give to leaders, what would you suggest they do to set the right culture or the right atmosphere to get these people to be able to kind of step up and break out of their comfort zone?
I think if you look at Asia, there's a lot of faith that are respected or needed by the leaders. There's a lot of pride. And I think sometimes with that, the honesty touch gets lost. In terms of answering your question, I would say that as leaders, we shouldn't be afraid to be surrounded with some very, very intelligent people, probably much more intelligent than yourself, and to have that honest discussion rather than to always be too concerned about the face value. Being honest means you're going to expose yourself, and it means you're going to show to others potential weaknesses that you have, which is also, I think, something that may be a bit of a taboo in Asia. Team that work for you, they're very well educated, they're very smart. And I think those who actually see what the leaders are trying to do will appreciate the honesty that comes through, because it's a lot more human, and it would mean that you have a lot of followers behind you. So maybe not to just always toe the party line, but to actually do something for the heart, to embrace people, because the younger generation now, I think they have a different feeling. They have a different purpose. So I think being honest and showing your real self, being a little bit more kind of, humility with that as well, I think that would go a long way.
An LT observation. Even leaders need to be confident. Sarah says leaders should not be afraid to surround themselves with smart, gifted people. As a leader, be honest. Be willing to expose yourself. This way you will gain followers due to your authenticity. Now, I'm sure you've interviewed hundreds, if not thousands, of people. Of course, you're interviewing for their experience or their functional skills, but is there something that convinces you to hire somebody when you're in that interview?
We do a lot of graduate interviews, and I think they always prepare. They've done their homework, but I suppose they sometimes come in and it's like a textbook interview. They give all the classical answers, but there's no meaning behind it. So therefore, I guess when interviewing different types of people, we're looking for somebody who can bring themselves into that interview and not to give the textbook answer. Because, we're always looking for somebody who's different, somebody who's memorable, somebody who can differentiate themselves from others, however that may be. And when you're seeing thousands and thousands of interviews and they always give you the same answer, but no real follow-up understanding, that doesn't really come out. So I think my only advice for those who are, going through the interview process is to bring an element of themselves into that process so that they are memorable, they can be differentiated. And that can come across through some humor, that can come across in being able to, I think, stick your neck out and give your own point of view rather than, what you may have read on a website. Somebody who really has that energy to want to make a difference. So it's that drive and enthusiasm that we're looking for. So I think personally, Lance, you know that in interviews, people make up their minds in the first few seconds, right? And I think, unfortunately, no matter how much I fight this, it's also true for me. So therefore, that person who's come to do the interview, they really have to make an impact in the first few seconds. Otherwise, I think the attention is gone.
This common theme keeps coming back of authenticity, of confidence, of uniqueness.
Yeah.
An LT observation. You want to be hired by Sarah? Don't give a textbook interview by saying what you think she wants. Be yourself. In her words, she said, bring yourself. Express your own point of view, your own ideas. Be authentic. Show how you're unique and the value that you will add to the firm. What characteristics, Sarah, do you admire in a leader?
Honesty. I think one word, honesty. And I say this because as a leader, very often you're asked to kind of portray a very positive image or give a very positive message in order to motivate your staff, in order to perhaps drive shareholder value. And sometimes it just so happens that within a life cycle of a company, within life, it's not always that rosy. So I think, being honest and treat your team with the intelligence that they deserve. Because I think everybody can read and understand, any kind of successes that the company's had and difficulties. I think celebrate when you have done something well together with your team, and never forget your team and give credit to your team, but also, face difficult times together and be honest with the communication. Otherwise, the followers, I think, will have some doubt into the genuineness of the leadership.
Sarah, how important is it to expand and build your network and build win-win relationships?
Oh, Lance, this is every single day, every single minute, you have to focus on your relationships. No matter how many relationships you build and how strong they are, the fact is people move. People move companies, people move on, people move positions. I think being kind to the person that you meet, never judge. You never know. So I have to say, only yesterday, actually, one of the contacts that I made a relationship with, at the time I didn't think it was that strong, maybe about 5 years ago, has now been moved into a very senior position in an organization that's very central to my job. And interestingly enough, he reaches out to me to speak to him at certain events, gives us the top spotlight. So I think, always be kind with people that you meet, always be grateful for the opportunities of who you get to meet, because you never know where they can be in the future. And I have to say, in all my years, actually, I still get emails from the first manager that I had. And I don't want to say how many years ago it was last. I don't want to disclose my age. But the first manager I had when I first went and worked for the authorities, obviously he's retired. And he drops me an email every now and then just to say, how are you? How are you doing? Blah, blah. And I'm very grateful that they even remember me. So, people stay as friends, people stay as influencers and contacts. And you know what? For us, people become our clients and they remember. So I think it's always really important that you keep those relationships. For me, there is never a lose-lose. It can only ever be a win-win. So it's absolutely front and center to everything that we do, Lance.
As you know, I've worked with a lot of the top professional services firms, and the STEPS program that you created and ran for a number of years is quite unique and impressive. I'd like for you to just share some of your thoughts about that program.
Lance, I was asked maybe about 10 years ago to take on at the time a training program for our talent who would be partner candidates in the future. I tried to do that, but I also tried to make a change. So this is where STEPS came in. And the reason I tried to do that was because I suppose in China at the time, you mustn't forget about 10 years ago, it was still, China is still, it has been booming. So the career path of many of our candidates has been very smooth. There was an expectation from our candidates that, after 13 years, and the magic number was 13, they would be made a partner. So this was absolutely, clear in their heads. There was no barrier, and it became a sense of entitlement that after you have done your years, you would make it as a partner and after you go for the rest of your life. And I suppose what I tried to do with the STEPS program was to, number one, encourage people to understand themselves better and not to be a clone in, the life cycle of a Deloitte person. A clone meaning, I'm just going to be another person doing the same thing. I wanted them to understand what were their personal strengths and weaknesses and really bring out that personal differentiation so that we could align our people to the strengths and align them to certain roles and responsibilities that would play to their strengths, and most importantly, something they would enjoy. So that's the number one thing we try to do in STEPS. Number two thing, we constantly ask them to identify what was the value that they would bring back to a company. What was the unique value that they could bring back? And that was what we called the business case. And that was very, very tough because, as I said, there was always an expectation that after all these years, they would simply make partners. So, why do you keep asking me what's my business case? So we try to develop them to really make sure that they identify new solutions, new markets that they could attach. How would they build relationships, Lance, with our clients of the government? What was it that they were really good at from a business point of view? Were they technical people? Were they negotiators? Were they relationship builders? What was their strength? So I think what we tried to do in STEPS was to move away from a sense of entitlement and a sense of that any progression, it's just meant to be, to a structure whereby we looked at each of our candidates and we nurtured them through to quite challenging questions in terms of what's unique about you, what do you have to offer, and what are you going to do to make an impact? It was all about themselves. And I think, having gone through this program probably for about 7 years, pulling out from our team comments about what they want to do, where they think they've been successful, where they are strong, where they are weak, has been a very challenging exercise, because I just feel that never in their lives have they been asked to do this. And they've been in an environment in China, especially where there's been very, very strong growth. So everything has just naturally progressed. And I think in steps, we're just trying to prepare them to always, identify how they could be different, how they could be unique. So coming back to all the points that we were saying. So the steps program was really put in there as a challenge, but it was to try to change mentality, try to transform the way that people think about business, and always pushing themselves to the next limit. Because it's very easy to settle into a pattern every day, expecting certain things to happen. So we tried our best to prepare the people to just be different, try different, and do different. And it has been a very, very difficult exercise. And I think in the booms of China, when there is no need to be different, then you just carry on doing the same stuff. So what's very important now, especially with this whole coronavirus, is how are people going to change? And knowing that you need to be changing and you're going to be prepared for the change, that's going to be the real test. So I hope, what we try to achieve with the STEPS program, I hope that people can remember that and hopefully reflect upon that as something, where at least they're not completely alien to the fact that, there could be challenges ahead, there could be difficulties ahead. So how am I going to prepare to make sure that I come out the winner in the whole process? So I think it'll be interesting to see whether we have succeeded because, as I mentioned, we really put this program about 7 years ago. So the partners who are now around the 7-year or 8-year experience, we will see how mature they are and how agile their thinking is nowadays.
Yeah, I think time will tell, how effective it was, but, your approach of really trying to get at the authenticity of a person, I thought that was very impressive and at times very frustrating, but it was an incredible program. You did a great job.
It's very frustrating, but I think once you've been with us on that journey, there were also some, very interesting times because we pushed our people so much.
We've been talking to Sarah Chin from Deloitte, and so Sarah, I'd like to thank you for your time and great insights.
You're welcome, Lance. Always great to speak to you.
To hear more of our 2 podcast series, Stories from the Top and Tanaka in 3, check out our website, www.lancetanakagroup.com. We're also on LinkedIn, Spotify, Apple, Spreaker, and Google. Remember to discover passion, live your dream. Have a great day.